Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages, and welcome back to the Great Movie Ride podcast. I'm your host, Gaston, with my co-host, Jerryofdom.
I always forget it when I read it second time.
And today we are talking about the Christopher Nolan film, Tenet. It was released just as the pandemic was getting real hot.
I remember seeing this movie in theaters.
Oh
It was
yeah?
just me and my mom and one other guy, and this one other guy sat right behind us. And I was like,
Lovely.
"You have an entire theater."
So I'm gonna start today with the previewing thoughts because I haven't seen this before. Um, I had heard mixed things about Tenet when it came out. I remember that. I heard it was visually impressive, but convoluted and needlessly complex. And I saw the trailer, like, I think I saw one trailer, and I'll be honest, the trailer didn't interest me. So I never made it a plan to see the film. I wasn't like, I'm never going to watch this film, it looks terrible. It's just, meh, I'd rather watch other things. So when you suggested it, however, I was mildly interested to see how it actually was. So I wasn't like against reviewing it either. I was just like, well, let's see what it is.
No, you were like, "Absolutely not. We're not doing this film."
You?
I when this movie, I only thing I really knew is that it was time travel. That's about all I knew. And so I walked in with my mom. We saw it. Walked out. I was left confused but yet satisfied at the same time. It's very so coming back. I think it was I enjoyed it more watching it a second time because you pick up on more of the things at the beginning of the movie, and it helps you understand it more.
So our plot light spoilers sum up. It's very tough for this film, so this is what I came up with. And the film follows a CIA agent who learns how to manipulate the flow of time in order to prevent an attack from the future that threatens to annihilate the present. Without getting into spoilers, that's pretty much all I got.
It's such a strange thing.
It's very Christopher Nolan.
Yeah.
So let's transition to the characters. One thing that I will definitely praise about this film is the naming conventions are brilliant. I think it is very clever. So first up is the protagonist. Legit, that is the only thing we know to call him by.
They never say his name the
Nope.
entire time. No one knows it.
He is portrayed by John David Washington. He is a CIA operative.
That's
Uh,
literally.
that's all you can say without getting into spoilers.
And even then, like,
We don't
that
know
pretty
much
much
about
is.
him.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. I like how they played him off in this movie.
Hmm.
And I think John David Washington, this is like his first real big acting movie.
I think so. Like
And
he got
especially
acclaim
coming
on
off
a show, but then he
yeah.
went like big.
And like and especially because of his dad being
Denzel.
Denzel Washington. Like he got a lot to live up to and I think he did really well in this movie.
Mm.
He gave a really strong performance.
Hmm. I agree with you with we never learn his name, and that really heightens the mystery, and that's something Christopher Nolan does often with his characters, either giving us just the first name, just the last name, and sometimes no name, as seen here. And yeah, he's very charismatic in the lead, and I think that he sells the role very well. It's a great job leading
Yeah.
this film.
I remember watching one review, and I think one of the funny things is, have you watched Mission Impossible? People?
No, I haven't actually.
Okay. Well, every time Tom Cruise starts running, he just has this run about him that you're like, holy crap! You can tell he's running for his life. And
Mm.
every time you saw John running in this movie, it felt like he is running with just this is his everything. He is just going for it.
Well, do you
And I
know
think that's
his backstory?
no.
He was a professional football player before becoming an actor.
Oh wow.
So he learned explosive sprints from
Yeah.
like right away.
Because when he's running, like
Hmm.
you would believe that he's running for his life.
Yeah, and it does help too. It's not like the beauty run; it's a full blown
And he's
sprint.
also really funny in this movie too.
He's got some good moments. So let's talk about Neil, who's portrayed by Robert Pattinson, the protagonist's handler. I get to start with him. I found Neil very interesting, and like you can never fully trust him because he knows more than he should, but Pattinson's performance makes you want to trust him, which makes him the perfect deuteragonist, the secondary protagonist. He's perfect because you can't trust him, but you want to trust him. And I found he was a combination of Arthur and Eames from Inception. If you rolled those two into one character, this is who you get. And he is, in fact, my favorite character in the film.
Yeah.
It was very
I
interesting.
I am so Robert Pattinson's really climbed up the ranks as one of my favorite actors in the movie cinemas.
Yeah,
I've
you've
only
seen the
seen him
Batman, though. I haven't
in
seen that.
Batman, and my goodness, he's a really good actor. He just got thrown into Twilight, so everyone was like, "Who the heck is this guy? Why do we want him in anything else?" I still haven't seen that other one that he was in, where it was like the black and white, the
Oh, The
lighthouse movie.
Lighthouse with Willem
Yeah,
Dafoe.
that one I've heard he's really, really good in too.
Mm.
But like from those three, all of them are like his big, like this is Robert Patterson, and I think he's doing really well getting. I don't know if he was in other things after Twilight too much,
I'm sure he
but
was, but probably nothing like this, leading a
yeah.
Batman film, for Pete's sakes.
But like he's got a strong performance in this movie. His
Mm.
character is interesting, and he always catches you off guard. As you said, he knows way too much, and you're like, okay, why do you
Hmm.
know this, buddy?
Yeah.
But I found on second time viewing, it's more interesting watching all of that play out because you
Mm.
see the little hints throughout the
Yeah.
film.
Yeah, I can see that. So let's transition to Catherine Barton, who's portrayed by Elizabeth Debicki, an art appraiser and Sator's estranged wife. You get to go first with our female lead.
I don't mind her in this film. I don't know. I wouldn't say she's my. She's one of my lower, liked characters in this film. I think
Did you recognize her?
she looks familiar.
Ayesha the Golden Priestess from Guardians Volume 2.
Oh, that's
Yeah. And the forthcoming Guardians Volume 3.
I. You know what? Now thinking harder about it, she's not that bad. She's got some good moments in this film that really are like she feels like the one person that is dragged through this journey, and she doesn't know anything that's going on, but
Mm.
she works with how it's going. It's like the in Inception, what was his name? The guy that they were trying to get to plant the idea in.
Oh, Robert.
Yeah, Robert. I can't remember his last
Yeah,
name
what?
anymore. But
Why
you get
can't
what
I
I'm
think?
saying. She is like that character that is stuck in the situation and has to go with it.
Fisher.
And
Robert Fisher.
Fisher. Fisher.
Goodness.
Yeah. She feels like a Robert Fisher in this movie.
Mm. Yeah.
And I feel like it's interesting, but she gives some very powerful moments in the movie.
Hmm. So I'm gonna start off my comments by saying that she is 6'3".
Plus,
She towers over everybody in this film, but especially her husband, Kenneth Branagh. More on him in a little bit. Hercule Poirot, for those who have seen Murder on the Orient Express. But man, that height difference is impressive. I thought that was pretty cool. And her performance is solid. She carries the emotional side of the film. She's really the only character who is allowed to show emotion
yeah,
because she's not a hardened member of the spy world. Um, and it's handled pretty well, but I do feel that some of the attempts to give depth to her missed the mark for me
yeah.
and just came off as clunky and not like I see what they were trying to do and it should have worked, but it just wasn't handled very well.
That's what I felt too.
Mhm.
And it's very, she did well though.
Mhm.
It's just how the movie was.
So now let's talk about Priya Singh, who's portrayed by Dimple Kapadia, an Indian arms trafficker. And I get to start here, and I'm just straight up Priya missed the mark for me entirely. She is presented as an all-knowing character, but doesn't come off as interesting or deep whatsoever. She feels like a plot device, not a character. They never make her matter to the viewer as much as she matters to the story, which is the biggest sin a film can make.
Yeah.
I have nothing positive to say. Boring performance, terrible writing with her. I have nothing good to say.
I think the only part I felt interested in with her was that one middle section, the second half. You know, the part where he shows up after airplane
Mm-hmm.
and talks with her, and it's like, oh, I'm talking and blah blah blah. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
I feel like that was the most interesting part she had, but it was the information she was giving, not her actual role and performance.
Yeah, she doesn't feel like a person. This could have been a computer.
Yep.
So, with all that being said, let's move on to Andrei Sator, portrayed by Kenneth Branagh, a Russian oligarch who communicates with the future. It's hard to say much else with spoilers, and you get to start with Mr. Sator.
Does he give a powerful performance in this movie? There are some scenes where I feel frightened by him. You know, when he gets loud and he gets like aggressive in the film, you're like, holy crap! I'm so glad I'm not there in front of him right now, because I'd pee my pants. And I think he gave a really strong role, though. I figured out more about his character second time viewing, which made him more interesting to me.
So, I've never seen Branagh in a villain role before, and I've seen him actually in quite a few things. Both times as Poirot, voice work before that. He's been around, but boy, is he a good villain. He is a thoroughly detestable character with no redeeming qualities. But unlike a lot of villains who are played that way, he never falls into 80s campy territory. He's just constantly threatening and sinister. While not my favorite character in the film, it'd be weird if he was. This might be the best performance in the film, and bravo to Kenneth Branagh. That was
It
really
so
good.
powerful.
I am an effing lion.
Okay, man. Okay, I'm
Yeah,
peeing my pants watching on screen, please.
it was pretty incredible. And like Kenneth Branagh is such a good actor. Like he's very underrated because especially when he has to shout, it comes off as so authentic. Like think about the end of Murder on the Orient Express when Poirot starts shouting at everybody. It's so effective. And then here as well with that villainous. It's so good. And he does accents well too.
Yeah,
French in those movies.
Russian in
Uh,
this one.
I think Ukrainian in this one.
He's supposed to be Russian, but
Well, they made reference to the fact that he was in Salinsk,
yeah.
Ukraine.
There's a lot of interesting little things that I'm
Well,
still trying to.
he's a Russian oligarch, which is when the Soviet Union fell apart, powerful businessmen took essentially all the money.
Mm,
So you don't actually have to be Russian to be a Russian oligarch.
no.
But yeah, it was good. And finally, let's talk about Ives or Eves. Is it Ives or Eves? I don't remember now.
Who are we talking about?
Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, the military commander.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's Ives.
Ives, okay, Ives. I get to start with Ives. He's our last major player in this story, and he only appears for the final act of the film.
Yeah.
Now, I'm gonna be brutally honest again. I have not seen Aaron Taylor Johnson impress me with a performance ever. He was boring in Godzilla. He was one note in Ultron. However, he was better in Ultron than he was in Godzilla, but still not great. And in this one, he was even better than he was as Pietro. Still not top of the line. I wouldn't even necessarily say good, but it is the best performance I've seen from him.
Yeah.
I wouldn't necessarily call it good, but it was the best I've seen from him.
Hey, hopefully he'll be good Craven the Hunter or something. I don't know.
I don't know, man.
I don't know.
I wouldn't put too much stock in that one. Also, I wouldn't put too much stock in a Sony Marvel Spider-Man villain film after Morbius.
Yeah, and also because he was Quicksilver already in the Marvel universe, so it's like, eh.
Well, Sony does what Sony does, like Venom, right? Anything you wish to add about Ives?
You know what? Yeah, I get what you're saying. Though I did enjoy the parts he was in. He feels like he's kind of done with the crap with the protagonist because the protagonist's like, we got to do this and this. He's like, no, you don't. Screw that. Well, there's bigger problems here. It's like absolutely not. So it's funny to watch that and the ending part with the characters.
Yeah,
That was.
that's like it's not that he was bad. I wouldn't say he was good, but he wasn't
I feel like
bad.
maybe if he was in maybe a bit more or just expanded on any bit, he might have been interesting.
He should have been alluded to or appeared near the beginning to
Yeah.
have his reappearance matter more.
Hmm.
But it is what it is. So let's transition to the effects and cinematography.
Oh boy.
The effects are pretty darn incredible in this film. I thought they were really impressive. It's very Christopher Nolan. There is no doubt in your mind that you are watching a Christopher Nolan film. And I feel like it is what he wanted to do with Inception, but technology had improved by a whole decade, so he was able to do more stuff. um, it's not the greatest we've reviewed as far as effects go, but I would say it's probably top three of the ones we've reviewed for
Yeah.
live action effects in any case. I especially want to give a shout out to a large part of the film, all the reverse sequences. It's done so well, especially the reverse fight choreography is
Oh
really
yeah.
cool.
That they had a lot of this interestingness with watching the reversing and all that. And you when you start seeing it first, you're like, this is really awkward and weird. But as you start to understand it a bit more, you're like, that's interesting. It makes it more interesting than weird, I think. And I thoroughly enjoyed yeah, the effects and
Effects.
everything. Because they used a lot of practical effects. That whole plane scene where they crash it, all practical.
Mm,
I watched the back and because they're like, it'll be around the same amount of cost to doing it instead of doing it in CGI. So they crashed a Boeing 747.
mm. The cinematography, in my opinion, is equal to Inception, which is to say, really good. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it surpasses Inception. You're going to see me make a lot of comparisons to Inception, mostly because I feel this film wants to be Inception. Like, it really wants to be on that same level. Doesn't meet the mark, stay tuned to find out. But it wants to be Inception, I feel.
Yeah.
Um, But Nolan, again, he has this very specific style that you can tell you're watching a Christopher Nolan film. I especially want to give a shout out to the framing of the action sequences. The shot selection is really inspired because it has to show what's happening while also not show what's happening for certain scenes, and it's handled very well.
Yeah, it was good. We're talking about the writing now, right?
That was cinematography we're talking
That
about.
was, you know,
Are you paying attention? You all right there, man?
I'm like reading the Wikipedia thing a bit to like get more information, and then for some reason I was like, I thought cinematography was great. I love the chasing running scenes, especially at the end when you're watching how everything moves and plays out, and it's so cool to watch it all play out, and I really enjoyed that. And
Mm.
seeing like the helicopters come in reverse or in forward, and you see all the people running it, so many different things, and I thought it was so cool.
So the writing and score. This is where the cracks begin to show. The writing is not bad, but it's not great. And I channel this down to one specific scene. In an effort to avoid an exposition dump, they choose to underexplain the main thing that needed to be explained. And I can't say what that is just yet, but I will come back to this as we go through the heavy spoiler section of
Mm.
they just chose to brush over it. And I get from a writing perspective why, but from a storytelling perspective, that was a horrible decision. The dialogue is good, but the
Yeah.
story has more holes in it than Inception did. Inception didn't have a ton of holes, but this one has more holes. And it's not a huge detractor because this is a very ambitious story. It is what it is.
I like the lines. There's some really strong, powerful ones that stick with you, and also I still love the line. I ordered my hat's ass an hour ago. That just sounds like something I would say. So it's just like I love that line. But I see what you're saying. There's some downfall because I feel like you're left with some things and you're like, hmm, what does this mean? And you never get to know.
So the score I thought was solid. It was pretty much on par with Inception, except nothing really stands out to me like the final track of Inception did on that outro scene.
Yeah.
Like it's not that it was bad, but nothing really stellar in my opinion.
I think I really like the score on this film. And it felt like a Christopher Nolan movie where there is this loud sounds all the time, and you're like, yes, music. It feels like something you'd listen to when you're ready to just go and just kick butt, but also be like cautious, Something that I'd listen to when we're playing the RPG. I enjoyed the score.
No, that's fair. Um, okay, so warning, warning, heavy spoilers ahead. Buckle up for this one, folks.
Oh boy.
The protagonist, a CIA operative, participates in an extraction at the Kiev Opera House. His team retrieves an artifact, but he is captured and tortured by mercenaries and ultimately consumes a suicide pill. And that's like the first 7 minutes.
You're really just thrown into this movie like immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, 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 my brain.
Yeah.
They're saying all these things I don't understand. And it's never really explained some of those things, and you're like, oh no. You're always left wondering. But did you notice the one character at the beginning of this scene that takes in the inverted bullet? When he is on the ground, he's picking up the bomb, and the one of the Ukrainians is like, "What are you doing?" and he's about to shoot
Mm-hmm.
him, and then the inverted bullet goes into the gun of the guy behind him.
Oh yeah, I know who that is.
Okay,
The
I
same
wasn't
thing
sure.
on the backpack.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I never knew that in the first viewing because I was still like, came out of a movie theater. I didn't really think too much about it. I'm
Mm,
like, there's so many things to take in. It's a
yeah.
2.5 hour long movie,
It's a pretty long one, yeah.
but like it adds so many extra things that you're like, oh,
Yeah,
that's
I
why.
did catch that one.
Now, I do like this whole scene though. It very felt like a very Christopher Nolan opening to a movie.
He likes to open in a big way. Like
Yeah.
thinking about Inception with in Sato's mind,
Dark
thinking
Knight
about Batman Begins, Dark Knight Rises on the plane with
and Dark
Bane.
Knight where they raid the bank
The
and
bank
everything.
raid,
And
yeah.
like, yeah.
He has a specific way he likes to introduce his films.
He likes to open up the movie and you're instantly like, whoa.
Yeah, you're captured immediately. Um, so sometime later, the protagonist awakens to learn that the artifact was lost and the pill was in fact fake, designed as a test. This is one of the lines I really like where he's like, "We all think we would jump into that burning building, but we never know until we feel the heat." I love that line. That's a very good line. And did you recognize who played his boss?
Ah, seems very familiar.
So he is a Hydra agent from Ant-Man who was trying to buy the Yellow Jacket suit. Yeah, I
Oh,
was like, hey, it's that guy.
a lot of little hidden characters, like
Yeah,
actors that you might not click with immediately.
true enough. Um, so an organization called Tenet recruits the protagonist and briefs him on bullets with inverted entropy, meaning they move backward through time. Now, I would just like to establish that
As good as
inverted entropy does not mean what they think it means. Entropy is how something reacts to gravity, and inverting that means it would float. They
mm.
throw a bunch of scientific terms at you and just hoping you don't know what they mean.
It worked for me because I didn't know what
It
it
works for probably 95% of the population.
meant. Me sitting there, oh, these words are bigger than I can spell.
um, it's a bunch of nonsense, and that is what I was complaining about earlier.
That's what
That
I
is
thought. Because
especially
it's just
when the woman says, "Don't think about it." That felt like Christopher Nolan's like, "Yeah, we don't know either. Don't worry about it. Move on." And it's like,
I,
no, you can't
I
do
want
that.
to know.
You
Why
can't
are those
do that.
bullets moving?
It's
No, it is a cool like seeing the bullets do that, but it's like, come
yeah.
on, explain.
So after meeting his handler Neil, Robert Pattinson, they trace the inverted bullets to arms dealer Priya Singh in Mumbai.
This was a cool scene.
The Mumbai
Breaking
scene?
into it,
Yeah,
you
that
know,
was pretty cool.
like slingshotting yourself over to the building and then bungee jumping off it.
Hmm.
Like you don't see that.
No, that's pretty
You know,
clever.
something you think, oh yeah, let's slingshot ourselves over and then bungee jump up.
It
No.
sounds so cartoonish that I half expected the main character to go splat, and then I realized no, this is like pretty real world physics. If he went splat, he'd be dead, and it wouldn't be a cartoonish or a superhero. It would
It
be
was like such a
dead.
cool scene.
It was well executed, absolutely.
Like you're like actually watching, you're like, this is such a dumb concept, but it works. This is so cool.
Well, would it actually work though? How would they get the bungee tethered up there? Because if you want to apply real world physics, what they did wouldn't have got the bungee up there to slingshot them.
Don't
They
worry about it, Peter.
exactly like it doesn't really work. No, but it was a cool scene. Um, so the pair then discovers that Priya is a member of Tenet and that her cartridges were purchased and inverted by Russian oligarch Andrei Sator. The protagonist then has a meeting with Christopher Nolan regular collaborator Michael Caine. Always good to see him. I was hoping he'd be in it longer this time because it was brief in Inception, and it's brief in this one too. I love Michael Caine. I do. But it's a good scene, but it's just one scene.
Yeah.
Save the world, we'll balance the books later.
Yeah.
um, so the protagonist poses as a billionaire to get close to Sator's estranged wife, Catherine, an art appraiser who authenticated a forged Goya drawing that Sator purchased from an acquaintance of hers. Sator discovered Kat's mistake and is using it to blackmail her to prevent her from seeing her son or leaving.
Okay. I forgot there was a question to ask, and it's during when he's talking to Michael Caine
Mm.
character. They talk about Satyr,
Sator.
yeah, Satyr, digging up that thing as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
So is Satyr actually like present time of the movie a teenager, and the one we interact mostly, he's come back from the future?
That's not what I got from it.
Because that's what I understood. Because like 2 weeks ago, he was digging it up, and there was an explosion, and then and then oh,
See, what I got from it is 2 weeks ago is when they found out what happened, is what I got from it. But maybe that wasn't the intention. But that's my understanding of it.
I don't know. I got that, and it felt like it made sense, but at the same time, hearing the thing of the collapse of the Soviet Union and all that, it's like, what?
um, I like how long it takes for us to finally see Sator. It's like a good 40 minutes into the movie before you actually see him, which is interesting.
Now, right after she's done talking with him, and she gets taken out, and then he has to go through the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
and he says, "I ordered my hot sauce an hour ago." I think that was a cool choreographed scene.
It was,
The fight,
yes.
that was pretty good. Like,
It
he
just
got
showed
creative with it.
how unready for actual resistance those goons were. They had
Yeah,
no idea who they were messing with. And
like
that's one
it's
of my
some
favorite
billionaire,
things.
and he
Yeah.
just like ends them.
That's one of my favorite things in action films is when the big tough goons who are used to like throwing one punch and dropping somebody like pick on the hero who's skinny and small but knows how to take a hit and fight, so they do their one punch technique and then get combo attacked into the next dimension. I love that.
But man literally kept his hand out, and they're about to slay you.
Yeah, he waited for the moment where they would loosen their grip and then
And then used a cheese grater. I was like,
yeah,
oh!
you get a brief glimpse of the red on that one. Like, oh.
Just then they're like, that's not the right type of wax.
Saving.
Ah. And then when he kicks him out the door, he just kind of,
Yep, just comes out buttoning his suit coat.
hello.
So, in exchange for Cat's help, the protagonist and Neil attempt to steal the actual drawing from Sator's Freeport storage facility at the Oslo airport, where they are attacked by two masked men who emerge from each side of a turnstile like structure. Uh, Pretty cool action sequence. I really enjoy watching this play out on both fronts. I think it's very cool. You can tell something is off about one of the masked men, and if you have been paying attention like I was, you can figure out what is off about
Yeah,
that guy in the fight because I was paying attention.
yeah.
Um, Pretty cool scene. I liked it a lot.
I really like that scene, and it sets up like an interesting realization later on too. If you're like struggling to pay attention because there's a lot of things.
Hmm. So, um, ba-ba-da-ba-ba. In Mumbai, after finding out the drawing is, well, no, they haven't found out yet. They think the drawing was destroyed in the explosion.
Yeah,
And in Mumbai, Priya later explains that these turnstile objects invert the entropy of objects and people, so that the masked men were actually the same man both entering and leaving the turnstile in opposite directions through time. Does that make sense with what is presented about the turnstiles later? Absolutely not. But they don't care. They
yeah.
will never address the fact that that contradicts what happens with the turnstiles for the rest of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever. They didn't care enough to worry about it. Fine.
Yeah.
But it's like I said previously, and you've shared the sentiment, analyzing movies closer with these reviews, the things like that really stick out.
I thought it made some sense because one is moving backwards,
Oh, it's
so
not.
he
It's not the guy.
okay.
The problem is how the turnstiles work for the rest of the film is one side is moving one way and one side's using the other, but not this time because otherwise the story doesn't work. They're moving, Neil and the protagonist are moving in the same direction, swiping on different sides, which is the opposite of how the turnstile works for the rest of the film. Like, it's just a big old plot error.
Yeah.
Or if there is an explanation, they don't give one.
Oh
So
no, my brain's like trying to think real hard of that scene. I'm just
if there
my
is an
brain.
explanation, they didn't give it. So that's the bottom line. Maybe it ended up on the cutting room floor or something. I don't know. Um, so, on the Amalfi Coast, I probably butchered that. Kat introduces the protagonist to Sator, who we get to see, and he has this incredible threat about how we're going to take a walk. We're going to go down past the street into the alley, and then I'm going to slit your throat, but not all the way across. Just one little incision in the middle of your neck. And then I'm going to cut off your balls and shove them into your own throat. It is fun to watch a man choke on his own balls. And it's like, it's funny, awkward, and intimidating all at the same time.
Yo, sit there like,
Like,
huh?
and it goes on for so much longer than you would think. I didn't even say all the lines because it just keeps going.
They
It's
said that like, what in the world?
it's like every word out of his mouth is more chaotic than the previous one. And he just keeps going. Um, and he does reveal to Kat that the drawing survived. He still has it. So an enraged and jealous Sator is planning to kill the protagonist, but upon sailing the next morning, Kat tries to drown him, and the protagonist saves Sator's life. The men strike a partnership to retrieve a case from Kiev that supposedly contains plutonium-241. Valuable.
A lot of information.
Yeah. Did I miss anything from this section?
Oh no, man.
I say we just go for it, and if you think of something, just stop me. Otherwise, I'm just going to stick to my notes.
There is one thing right afterwards, after she tried drowning him, and he saves him, and then she barges into his room, and you just see that height difference so strongly in that
Yeah.
scene, and it feels intimidating. She did really well in that scene with her acting. I thought I was like, dang.
So, in Tallinn, the protagonist and Neil successfully steal said case, but are then ambushed by an inverted Sator holding Kat hostage. Not inverted Kat, normal Kat, who's about to
Analyze
become
the scene
inverted.
because this was a cool scene. This whole heist type thing. I
If
thought.
you turn off your brain, it's a lot more enjoyable than trying to figure
Really?
out what the heck is happening. Because why would he care about inverted cat unless it was the our cat being inverted, which we never actually see him do
I
because he
was gonna
leaves
ignore the
her
whole
behind.
cat scene entirely. What I'm
Okay,
focusing on is when they break into that one truck and they've got the Ford trucks and it's such a
okay.
cool scene. That's what I'm talking about. That scene was confusing as heck, and I'm just still like, eh?
Yeah, I agree. We probably shouldn't dwell on that one because clearly the script writers didn't either. So we'll just sure. Let's talk
that,
about the
that
truck
that part's a
sequence.
little confusing. I don't know who died in that scene or what. I was like, okay,
Let's
something
just
happened.
talk about the truck sequence.
But the trucks, fire truck. Oh, I've seen a fire truck. King like a kid. This scene, the whole setup and everything, I thought it was really good. And with the music and everything, it feels tense, and
Mm,
you're like, holy crap! Something feels like this is about to happen, you know?
mm,
Like, and then the whole thing starts going crazy after that, you know?
yeah.
And also the scene right when they're taking Kat into the warehouse,
Mm,
and you see the guy through the fence sitting in the car with the mask on. You're like, hmm,
mm-hmm,
what's going on here? Something up, because nothing's really been too explained about the inversion of people and all that yet. So you see that and you're like, hmm, what the
mm.
heck is this? And then as everything slowly reveals itself, you're like, oh, he was waiting for him.
Yeah,
And
true.
then you see the trucks and the way they just get him in a little spat. It's such a cool scene watching them all collapse on him. I don't know why. I really like that scene. And then if we ignore the whole premise of him
Yeah,
having a
yeah.
hostage cat, that's a pretty cool scene too.
I like the car chase and how you see. I love that this film you see really you're just seeing half of a full scene at a time,
Yeah.
and then and they don't leave you too long till you see the other half for the most part. Especially
Yeah.
with the driving one, it's not long at all till you see the other half of it. Um, so they have the where's my notes? Right, the protagonist gives an empty case to Sator and rescues one version of Cat, but they are soon
This.
recaptured
Yeah.
and taken to a warehouse with a turnstile. The inverted Sator demands the location of the object and shoots Cat with an inverted round. That was a pretty cool sequence because of the bullet mark in the glass and the blood, you know where it's going, and the protagonist does as well, and he's trying so hard to prevent it from happening. As interesting. Um, so Sator then escapes into the turnstile when Tenet operatives, led by Ives, arrives, and the heroes take Kat through the turnstile to allow her inverted wound to heal.
Did you notice there was two though? Because there's the present time Sator and then the past, future Sator, whatever, on the other side. Because he starts talking to him, and he's like, "I already told you this. Why are you asking again?" Type of deal, but tells him
Mm-hmm.
anyway. And I think that was a pretty. This scene was cool, but also a little bit confusing.
I understand the complaints people had about this film being overly complicated and convoluted. I get it.
Stuff for tiny brain people.
Yeah, I get it. Um, so the protagonist travels back to the ambush to and attempts to retrieve the object, but Sator overturns his car, which we saw the aftermath of in the previous
Yeah.
scene, and sets it on fire. Sator gets away with the artifact, and the protagonist is once again saved by Tenet operatives.
I want to mention something. Right when he walks out after being inverted, he walks outside for the first time. I felt like that was such a cool scene.
It was pretty cool,
Because you're
yeah.
taking it in. You're like, whoa, that seagull, it's going backwards. All these sounds are going backwards. Everything is going backwards.
Yeah.
What in the world? And it made me notice something. A lot of the music in the first half is reversed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then when they're in the inversion, it's switched to normal. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's such a cool thing.
Yes. That is a
And
very cool
that,
idea.
that whole scene and him figuring out how to drive and all that and all of it, I thought this was cool.
Mm. Ugh, sorry. So, the protagonist then travels back in time to the free port in Oslo, where he fights his past self, which we saw play out earlier with the protagonist fighting this masked man, and then goes through the device and um, enters the turnstile, followed by Neil and Kat separately to save Kat because
Yeah.
apparently inverted wounds heal in the inversion state,
Yeah.
which is opposite what we were told by the scientist lady at the
I
beginning, but
know.
okay.
Oh man.
It doesn't hold up to intense scrutiny at the end of the day. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
um, so uh, he visits Priya, who explains Sator now collected all 9 pieces of a device called the algorithm, which will enable people in the future to invert the entropy of the whole world in order to destroy their past. To complete his task, Sator plans to bury the algorithm uh, at Stelsk 12 and transmit its location to in a digital time capsule. Kat reveals Sator is in fact dying from cancer, and the team surmises he plans to travel back to commit suicide during a recent family vacation to Vietnam, sending the coordinates into the future using a dead man's switch. That's the premise for the climax here.
Yeah, I didn't understand that at all.
See, most of that works. The problem is how um okay, so what confused you? Maybe let's compare notes. What confused you with this one?
So he is somehow So he's gonna kill himself, but this thing also supposed, if it goes off, it's supposed to just end time itself.
No, so he's dying.
Yeah.
And when he dies, the algorithm's location is sent into the future.
Okay.
So they can dig up the time capsule and use the algorithm to destroy the past. So it's not destroying time, it's destroying the present. And they tried to explain why they would do it, and it doesn't make sense.
No.
Because,
Tried to compare it to the Manhattan Project kind of thing.
yeah, but at the end
It's
of the
like,
day, you just create a paradox. Because if the
yeah.
president is destroyed, then Sator could never send the corners, which means the president's
They're
still
literally
alive.
talking about the grandfather paradox.
And
And
then
they're
they
like,
just move on.
I think what Neil was going off was that they think that they can just still do that, but they don't realize what would actually happen if they did that.
I mean, I guess, but it's like, we're not scientists and we've figured out, yeah, that's a paradox. And then there's
Yeah,
these scientists in the future who are like, nah, it's fine.
this will be great. Let's create a paradox, see what happens.
Yeah,
Maybe a paradox would actually destroy time itself.
quite possibly. You never know.
Because you think about it hard enough, and you're like, it wouldn't work. So with time itself, just
Have you heard the Rick Astley paradox?
yeah,
That's a fun one.
you know.
For those viewers who may or may not know, to create the Rick Astley paradox, all you have to do is call him up and ask him if you can borrow his copy of the Pixar film Up on DVD. Because he's never going to give you up. But he's never going to let you down either. By not giving you up, he would be letting you down. And therefore creates the paradox.
And time itself ends.
Watch him have, like, burned all copies of Up near his house for that specific reason. He's a Tenet agent just keeping us safe.
The stores nearby and make sure that they don't have Up in storage or anything.
Simply because he's a Tenet agent trying to save the universe. So the protagonists, Neil and Kat, travel back in time with Tenet troops. Kat will pose as her past self and try to keep Sator alive in Vietnam until the Tenet forces can recover the heavily guarded algorithm in Stalsk 12. They use a temporal pincer movement, with non-inverted and inverted troops making a simultaneous assault. But the protagonist and Ives are on a splinter mission to go and get the algorithm, both acknowledging that whoever sees it can't leave the field, so they go alone. But are caught by Volkov, Sator's intimidatingly tall bodyguard, who is about to bury the algorithm. So, this scene, unlike quite a few scenes in this film, actually holds up pretty well to scrutiny. I didn't notice anything. I was like, it doesn't make sense. It's kind of like, okay, all right,
Yeah.
I see it.
I think the only thing that got me a little confused is this Sador. I'm screwing up his name every time. Is he the one that we've dealt with throughout the film?
Yes.
On the okay.
So what
'Cause
happened
that's what
was,
I got.
so here's what happened. Vietnam Sator, or sorry, Vietnam Cat and Child leave.
Yeah.
Vietnam Sator leaves. In the actual history, Sator will return after they return from the shore. He will return by helicopter. So what happens is, by going back in time, Cat and Child Vietnam leave. Vietnam Sator leaves. Present Sator arrives. Present Cat waiting for him. Because he can go back and his men won't question it as long as he shows up in the same helicopter. Which is why he's so surprised to see her. I thought you'd gone to shore, but also why he can't call bullcrap, because in the actual history, he didn't go back. And Kat has to pretend that she doesn't know he's going to be there, for the same purpose that that cat can't know that he didn't go back.
Yeah.
That's how it works. I actually thought that was pretty clever how that was handled.
It's like I kind of understood it, but I was also like,
It's like both people were playing the same game, but didn't know the other person was playing the game, is what it was. which was very interesting. So
Uh,
that was cool. Or
and
rather,
this,
Sator's playing the same game that Kat is, but Sator doesn't know Kat is playing. Is what it is. But Kat knows Sator is playing because that's why she's there.
yeah. Now, I think the real this final end part, the last 10 minutes. Yeah, it's not actually 10 minutes. But this whole scene in Russia, Siberia, I thought it's such a cool scene.
It was pretty well done.
This is like my favorite in the whole movie. I love this whole. They have to make sure everything lines up, or things go south,
Hmm.
and they're just always reusing the people.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's cool. So
Hmm.
you think about it, all of the blue team, each crate is probably the same people in each crate.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa!
um. So, Sator calls the protagonist, and tells him that the people in the future want to reverse entropy to escape the effects of climate change. As he stops the call, an inverted soldier with a trinket on his pack sacrifices himself to save the protagonist and Ives, and they secure the algorithm and shove Volkov into the time capsule.
Yeah.
Um,
So when they dig up that time capsule, they'll find a body.
yeah. And before Sator can kill himself, Kat shoots him in the chest, and then he has like actually a surprisingly gruesome death scene because if you watch closely on the CGI on his neck as he
He goes,
falls into the water, he's broken neck, pushed off the boat, very dead. And this calls back to in the flashback sequence of Vietnam, Kat says that other woman diving off the boat, which was in fact Kat at the end of the film,
yeah.
which was pretty interesting.
But also, why wouldn't she question the whole reason there's a woman diving off her
Just
husband's yacht?
just thought that when she went to shore, he was having an affair, is what she thought. And oh no, she's coming, time to dive off
No.
and swim away. So it was pretty clever how that worked out. Um, and then Kat escapes and they drag Sator's body with them in the boat. Special shout out to Mahir, helping them through multiple scenes in the film. He is portrayed by Hamish Patel from Yesterday. I was just like, I
He's a
know that
great
guy.
actor.
Yeah, like, I know that guy. It's nice. He's not in it much, which is why we didn't talk about him, but I know that guy. So the protagonist, well, Neil saves the protagonist and Ives, pulls them out of the collapsing bunker, with the understanding again that no one can be allowed to leave this field having seen the algorithm. So as Ives prepares to kill all three, he changes his mind and is like, look, we all know that we have to die to keep this a secret. But maybe each man can decide when that is for himself. And they split up the algorithm between the people. And they part ways. Then Neil returns his part of the algorithm to the protagonist as the protagonist notices the same trinket on Neil's bag. As Neil is the one
And he
who
tries to
just
stop
died.
them.
Neil is the one who just died, saving them. Neil reveals that he was recruited by the protagonist in the protagonist's future, but Neil's past. And I love the line of, so what next? Well, for me, it's the end of a beautiful friendship. For you, just the beginning. Faces his death like a man. Later, Priya attempts to assassinate Kat for knowing too much about the protagonist, having realized he is the mastermind behind Tenet, kills Priya instead. Should have killed her earlier. Yep. And that is the long, convoluted plot of Tenet. So, favorite and least favorite scene?
Favorite scene is the last battle.
Yeah.
It's so cool to me.
My favorite scene is the hallway fight scene in Oslo Part 2 from masked protagonist point of view. I really like that scene. It feels really cool. Least favorite?
You go first for the least favorite.
My least favorite is when the protagonist is learning about Tenet and the woman scientist says, "Don't think about it." That just felt like Christopher Nolan saying, "We know it don't make sense."
Yeah,
I hate
and
it.
there's a few that I think of, and that's one of the few. So I'll just put that as my least favorite. There's a few seats, and I'm like,
So overall rating,
I give it a solid 75.
not as high as I thought you were gonna put it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I figured this would be somewhere in the high 80s for you. Well,
As personal watching it, I think I enjoy a good movie. Yeah,
yeah, we're actually not as different as I thought we'd be, as my rating is 74. I enjoyed it too. It
yeah.
does not hold up to scrutiny at all.
Now, what do you mean by it doesn't hold up to scrutiny?
Like all the plot holes and things that don't make sense. So when you
Yeah,
scrutinize, that's when you look into it. That's when you
yeah.
examine it deeper. That's scrutiny. So it doesn't really hold up to scrutiny. But I did enjoy watching it. So that is our thoughts on Tenet, still higher than the critics gave it.
Yeah.
Um, Next up is an anime film, A Silent Voice, which Nick has been trying to get me to watch for
Oh, wow.
probably a year at this point.
Yeah.
So
You're gonna
that
cry at this film.
we'll see. So that is what is in store next time. So thank you everybody so much for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed it. Drop a follow. Check out Gmod on YouTube and the Gmod Squad on YouTube and the Gmod Squad Presents on Twitch. That's our stuff
Watch
as
the
well.
VOD of Getting Over It with me if you want to see me absolutely lose my mind and say
Yeah.
some ridiculous things.
And
Quite
stay tuned
hilarious.
for the remix of that stream. I have some good ideas for that. So that's going to do it for this episode. I've been Gaston.
I've been Jerryofdom.
And we will see you in the movies. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.